Is this the solution? In short time now, we're seeing that the pepper spray legislation has been passed. And the other string of violent crimes that were perpetrated against women in the run-up to that and just following after it, and all of these incidences occurring in such a close period of time, triggered a national movement, the candlelight movement, the vigils, which had its own separate set of commerce and bacchanal and confusion. But that's aside from the original intention behind it, where many people came together to make a joint statement, to make a public national joint statement that the violence that we're seeing in our country perpetrated specifically against women is something that we do not want and something that we would not stand for. One of the demands of the candlelight movement was to pass pepper spray legislation or self-protection legislation. The intention is to give young ladies, well, not only young ladies, but specifically because that was the group that was being targeted, that was the group that was being noted. It was to give young ladies some measure of protection so that as they move about with their life, there's some measure of defense that they can try to count on if God forbid such a situation arises. So now we're seeing that the pepper spray law has passed. Pepper spray law passed in less than 6 months after the kidnapping and murder of court clerk Andrea Barrett, 23. Both houses of parliament acceded to a public outcry to do more to protect women as the House of Representatives on Wednesday passed legislation to allow members of the public to use pepper spray for personal protection. Following the lead of the Senate last month, the House unanimously passed the Firearms Amendment Bill 2021 piloted by Attorney General Faris Al-Rawi, who hoped it would give the vulnerable a fighting chance against predatory criminals. At a march through Port of Spain held by women's groups, the rallying cry was "Walk Free," a call for women not to have to be told to live carefully, but rather for a curb on male predation. And as a result of these marches, we're seeing about 6 months down the road, legislation passed. In itself, the response of legislators to the public outcry could be seen as a good thing. But then on the other hand, when you're thinking about the laws of the land, you do not necessarily want our laws to be written and structured out of knee-jerk reactions. As enough complaints arise, you run down to the parliament and attempt to write some laws to solve and ease whatever complaints are being made. And that's not necessarily a good recipe for good law writing. But that's not necessarily to discount this piece of legislation. Maybe the pepper spray may actually be helpful in our country, and maybe the pepper spray may actually help to save some lives and may work to help some people out of some otherwise difficult circumstances. It's meant to be a defensive weapon, so at least there's a chance that at some point in time, someone would be able to use it in their own defense, and they would be able to have some protection due to this law that is passed. Being that it is intended for defense, especially for the defense of young women, it makes perfect sense that they are allowing it to be available and accessible for people down to the ages of 16. If you're over the age of 16 but under the age of 18, you can get a parent or a guardian to go purchase it for you and their permission to purchase it, and you can have this for your own protection. The minister in the Ministry of the Prime Minister came out, though, to negate the idea that this may just be a knee-jerk reaction. He came out to let people know that this was well thought out and they had a paper done to research into this. And the decisions that were made after that were made in consultation and research. He began by saying the legislation was not a knee-jerk reaction, but came after the government had requested a position paper early last January from the Office of Law Enforcement Policy of the Ministry of National Security when he had been the minister. Young cited the document. The first point that struck me was the effect of pepper spray: acute eye pain, temporary blindness, and acute ocular discomfort, respiratory symptoms including wheezing, coughing, shortness of breath, rashes, blisters, and burns. It concludes in that part, it is therefore a dangerous weapon. But isn't that the intention? You want a kind of dangerous weapon. If all it did was give a tickle, then it wouldn't be much of a deterrent to people who are trying to defend themselves. If you're spraying someone with something, you want it to do some amount of harm, and enough harm to them that they would change their mind about whatever bad intentions they had for you in the first place. Minister Young went on, so let us not fool ourselves, even as we take a decision here today to give access to pepper spray to persons as young as 16 years old, that this is not something that is potentially dangerous. Well, of course. Reading out the pros and cons of the device, Young was concerned pepper spray could give bearers a false sense of security. He said the government had opted for liberalization of access and said this would take the country into a new realm, but was being done after rigorous consultation. The minister made sure to point out that contrary to what some other people may believe, and honestly, what I may have a leaning towards believing, is that the process will not be bureaucratic at all. You would be able to go in there and with relative ease get your pepper spray license and acquire your pepper spray. I would believe that when I see it, because generally speaking, every single government and state procedure in Trinidad generally takes longer than it needs to. Young disagreed with Hussein, that's one of the opposition MPs, saying this product was for women. He said it's not only for women in society, there's no gender prohibition here, so anyone over the age of 18 who is not prohibited can get it. Any boy or girl between the ages of 16 to 18, once their parent or guardian says they can, they have access to it. The question that arises with pepper spray is, would it be effective at what we intend it to be effective for? Would it be effective at decreasing the chance? If we're being honest, what this is for is the intention is that should a woman stumble upon some one of these monsters out there that has the intention of perpetrating violence against her, that she can extract this pepper spray and use it and make easy her escape. So would that actually work? Would that actually be effective? And does that solve the problem? And in fact, what is the problem? You hear many people when they're speaking about the violence against women, they go into the gender-based violence scope. So we're speaking about gender-based violence. Why are these men violent against women? And I took a general search of gender-based violence on the internet and saw the recommendations that they have out there for solving gender-based violence and how they recommend people deal with it. And generally you see two different styles of recommendations when you look at gender-based violence and how you counter it. One set of recommendations generally you see when you're looking at a less developed and a poorer country, and another set of recommendations you see when you're looking at a more developed country. The recommendations that I find usually make more sense are the recommendations in the less developed country, because these recommendations usually get around to prescriptive measures, as in what someone can actually do. These are tasks that can actually be done. Oftentimes when you see the recommendations in wealthier, more developed countries, even countries like ours, when you see the recommendations for gender-based violence, the recommendations sometimes get so theoretical and so academic and scholarly. They're talking about opening up discussions and speaking about male privilege. And oftentimes what you see happening when the discussion on gender reaches such a scholarly level, many people are left out. Some people are annoyed, many people are annoyed, and those that may even have intention to agree with some of the points being made are left out because they don't understand the context of some of what is being said. So when you're saying things like Trinidad has a rape culture, you have to describe exactly what you mean by that. So oftentimes when people speak about rape culture, what rape culture refers to is the general habits of the society, the norms of the society that allow for a general normalization of abusive tendencies and a lack of understanding of consent to flourish within a specific culture. And that's generally what people refer to when they're speaking about rape culture. And personally, I don't agree that Trinidad necessarily has rape culture. There may be certain sectors of people that allow this, but when you're speaking to the general public in Trinidad isn't okay with any kind of abuse against women. Yes, there is sexism, and I don't think that there's ever going to be a time where we could get rid of any one of these isms, whether it be sexism or racism. They're inherently part of the flawed nature of humans. So wherever you see people gather, you're going to see these isms form. And it makes proper sense if you're thinking to try to end gender-based violence at the root of the problem, that you're going to attempt to change mindsets. Everyone speaks about this. What you're attempting to do is change the mindsets of these young men. Don't teach your daughters what to wear. Don't teach your daughters how to walk necessarily. Teach your men, your boys, not to perpetrate these crimes. But that's just the thing. Most boys, most men are already taught not to do crime. No parent goes out there teaching their children to perpetrate, well, not no parent, but most parents, the general upstanding parent in society doesn't go out there encouraging any one of their children to perpetrate crimes. And to me, especially when we're looking in a society like ours, I think that's the main angle we need to tackle gender-based violence on. The fact is, it's a crime. We're not just talking about some abstract ideas of sexism and whether some men don't like women or they see women as less. We're talking about actual crimes. And yes, the root cause of some of these crimes may be sexism, as sexist as someone may be in their mind. If they think that they cannot get away with perpetrating a crime, they're much less likely to do it. So I think the solutions for gender-based violence lay in crime solving. The problem in Trinidad, why we're seeing increase in gender-based violence, is because we're seeing increase in general crime. We're seeing increase in general violence. Trinidad has become a crime-filled society, and many criminals go out there and do these crimes because they know, or at least they perceive, that it is unlikely that they're going to be caught. If we're looking at specific situations, generally I don't even like to mention some of these victims' names to not allow their families to go back through some of this trauma. But if you think back over the specifics and the details of some of these crimes that went on, at what point in the timeline of these crimes being carried out would pepper spray have been able to stop it? So as I see it, if we're looking to the pepper spray legislation and the allowance of pepper spray now in our society to have some significant impact on the level of crime that women and girls face, I think we're being misled. And also to those who keep saying that what we need to do is teach the boys how to behave, etc., etc. Most parents are doing just that. The problem is the criminals. And you could say, just as you could say, teach the boys not to perpetrate this specific violence. You could say, teach murderers not to murder. Teach thieves not to thief. Teach politicians to be honest. If it was that simple, then the world would have already been solved. We would have already just have taught everyone how to be a good person. The idea that it is even possible through any amount of teaching to get proper morals into a population is untrue. Many people have tried it. If it was true, then we'd have seen that as people get more educated, they get more moral. And that is not true. Education isn't synonymous with morals. So you may have some people, some lecturers even in universities that went through the workshops. They may have even taught the workshops on consent. And when you see into their personal lives, they aren't very good people either. They may still perpetrate these crimes. Some of these men may be some of the worst perpetrators of gender-based violence, and they're well educated on the subject. So as I see it, I think that the solution to gender-based violence is the solution to any violence. Crime solving. What we need to do is improve the police ability to catch people once they have done this crime and to convict them once they have done this crime. Other than that, things like pepper spray are just a stopgap legislation. Now, do not get me wrong, I am in full agreement of the pepper spray legislation. I am of the belief that it is every person's individual right to defend themselves. I find it ridiculous to have laws that would limit the access to weapons, claiming that they would be dangerous, while these laws aren't kept by criminals. The criminals break these laws. So when you have a law that prohibits weapons, the only people that don't get these weapons are the law-abiding citizens. And I don't have a problem with that if the police can execute their jobs in such a way that no one has guns. If no one has any guns, if no one has any weapons, then it is fine. That's okay with me. None of us have it. We're all on even playing field. I don't have to worry when I'm walking the street that someone would have a weapon that I cannot have access to and that they can confront me with this. But from the moment that law enforcement is incapable of stopping criminals from getting access to weapons, then I think it may make some sense to allow the regular citizens access to these weapons too. Comment and tell me what you think. I know many people have some serious worries about allowing dangerous tools into different people's hands. But I think, like, for example, cars. Cars are very dangerous tools and we allow most people to have it. Just about everyone in your neighborhood may have a car. And you don't walk the neighborhood worried that someone is going to jump in their car and attempt necessarily to kill you with it. Although there are some psychopaths out there who may indeed commit crimes with cars, you aren't worried about the general public doing that. And a car is a dangerous tool. So maybe the worry about dangerous instruments in the hands of our neighbors may be exaggerated. Tell me in the comments, what do you think? If you haven't liked the video yet, don't forget to do that, to click that like button. If you aren't subscribed yet, subscribe and click the notification bell so you know just when the videos drop, and share the content. Increase the engagement, increase the discussion. The more people that join the discussion, the more interesting it would be, and I guess the more we would learn from it. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow at 10 a.m.
And you feel the music, feel the music.